Settle down, guys. Settle down. Alrighty. Okay. Shall we wait for? We'll wait for them. Hey crew, what's up? Glad you can make it out tonight. We're keeping it close and personal tonight so that you guys get the most you possibly can out of this. I'm Kate. I'm a physical therapist. I run the Helios ACL project, which is a program that helps people after ACL injury make it back to the field better than before. Now, some other things that I think are pretty important to know about me is I had the wonderful opportunity to work here at Recovery. So I've trained with the absolute best. And I have been a lifelong athlete, and really what this talk is about today is keeping athletes on the field the best that we can. So we're going to keep it as tactical as possible, teach you guys some things to hopefully take away from this that you can start to implement with your athletes, with your teams, and with yourself to protect yourself best as possible. Now, very important fact about me. So some of the reasons we're here today is obviously we want to be focusing on the lacrosse side of this because I know recently there's been some injuries and we want to see if we can attack those so that that no longer is a factor. So as you can see, I'm an experienced lacrosse player. I actually started playing in third grade for women's lacrosse before they even had like out of bounds like rules. So you just run 3 miles down the field until the ref is like, all right, finally bring it back here. So lacrosse has been a part of my life, pretty much as long as I was in organized sports. So I know what it means to really be a part of a team and stay on the field to the best of your ability. So that is our goal. Okay. So ACL injuries are on the rise. Why? So some of the reasons we're not exactly sure. So we're going to talk about what we know, what we think the research will show in the future, and just kind of break it down for you guys in a way that's simple. So around 200,000, I've seen research as high as 400,000 ACL injuries occur yearly. That's not to say that all those people are getting surgeries, but that is the amount of frequency this is happening. And it is only going up year by year by year. So something we're doing is causing that to happen. So we want to look at some things we can do to prevent that and just understand a little bit more deeply, like why is this even an issue in the first place? Okay, so some factors that we think are contributing and pretty consistent with the timeline of incidents increasing is that factually, kids are playing one sport or doing something called early sport specification, where they stick with one sport and they don't branch out. Now, the problem with that is the research really supports that athletes that play multiple sports throughout the year have more diverse movements, more robust athleticism, and actually have a higher chance of making it to a D1 program, which is something that most athletes who are serious want to do. So that's one factor. The other factor that, the research correlates it, still being researched, is the increased prevalence of like turf fields, not wearing turf shoes on those fields, if someone's wearing cleats on a turf field, they tend to catch a little bit more. So that could be a factor that is something that we could change, something that the research may show in the future, like, hey, cleats on a turf field is like pretty bad, don't do that. But right now it's still a little bit murky, more of a area of interest than anything else. But something to consider, the surfaces we are playing on and the surfaces our athletes are going on may have a factor into the increased incidence of ACL injuries. The other thing is, and I'm sure you all are seeing this, like kids, and when I say kids, I mean collegiate athletes, I mean high school athletes, they're doing a lot. That means between school, AP classes, not just sports, the stresses of life are like more than ever. And like, I felt that when I was going through high school. I talk to kids now. There's just a lot of different stuff going on. So ACL injuries never happen just because, well, non-contact specifically, and I'll kind of get into the different pieces of this, but it's never just a physical phenomenon. There always is the whole human organism that kind of is affected. So when stress is high, we see an increased incidence of ACL injury. So that's like final season. That's when everything is happening at once. We see it like during breakups. You're in fights with your friends. Your body experiences like a full neurological fatigue that affects you. So what I want you to take from that is not that you can't take hard classes and you can't have breakups. It means there's just more going on here than meets the eye, and it's not just that we have to train one certain way. It's not just that we have to like make sure we're taking enough recovery days. It's kind of all the things lining up together. So why do they occur? Now, you may have noticed that if you're looking at this bubble, the ladies' incidence of non-contact injuries is a lot higher than men. Now, there's a couple reasons this might be. Some we can change, some we can't change. Let's just talk a little bit about what a non-contact injury is versus a contact injury. So a contact injury is you're running down the field, a football player comes and smashes your leg out from underneath you, exceeds the tensile force of the ACL, boom, pop. Not much you could do about that besides put yourself in a bubble, which no one is going to do. Contact injuries or non-contact injuries are having to do with the way someone is moving and using what we call like aberrant movement patterns or movement patterns that cause the ACL to tear. So most often we see it if someone is running and cutting with a little bit of internal rotation at the hip and their knee falls in. There's other mechanisms it happens, but that's the highest prevalence you're going to see it. What a lot of ACLers, or ACL athletes will describe is my foot just wasn't where I thought it was, which kind of plays into the sensory part of this, which we're going to get into. Any questions on that so far? It's meant to be interactive, so I don't want to lecture too much. Okay, so some of the things that I've kind of already touched on. We have anatomical factors, and I'm going to focus this talk mainly on the ladies, since that is where we're seeing this trend really increase compared to men. And we know that non-contact injuries are the type of injuries that we might be able to do something about, so we definitely want to be focusing on that. So this conversation really is around things that contribute to non-contact injuries. So first let's talk about the least actionable, and then we're going to move our way to the most actionable. So as far as anatomical factors, there's some facts about women's bodies, especially as they're heading into puberty, that we can't really change, right? And this stuff is like correlation, meaning we see a pattern, not definitely causation. I just want to be clear on that. So if you're someone that has wide hips, like you don't have to freak out. There's a lot we can do. So as women go into puberty, right, we don't have to review the whole thing, but you know, their hips get wider, which puts them in relatively more knee valgus, which is kind of this like fall in position because your hips make that nice hourglass shape, right? So being in a valgus position is one of the things that contributes, or the position of ACL tear. Just because you have knees that are more in than your hips does not mean your ACL is going to spontaneously combust. Just one of the things that we can't change. Some other anatomical factors would be like if you have joint limitations that are making you move in a certain way that is not advantageous. So it could be limited ankle motion. It could be some weakness at your hips. Those are things that some we could change, some we can't. The other thing that, you know, particularly for ladies is like a conversation, like, and I just want to address it because if you put in like, why do women get more ACL tears? You're going to see a bunch of things come up and be like, I don't know what's true. So the period gets blamed a lot. I wouldn't stress too much about it. You know, the research is a little bit murky because everyone's period is a little bit different. So it's hard to really narrow down what are risk factors and what are not for women. Now, I do think the research will show that in the future, there's some increased correlation in certain phases of the cycle, But as of right now, there is nothing concise, there is nothing causative. Working with a lot of ACL athletes, I do just anecdotally, like a lot of them will say, like, yeah, when I tore, like it was a couple days before my period. So noticing a pattern, which is really interesting, maybe the research will show that in the future, but there's so many things we can control that I wouldn't stay up late at night thinking about, oh my God, should I go out tomorrow and play hard? Because, you know, at a certain point in my cycle, we don't have to go there with it. Okay, some other factors that cause or contribute to ACL tears is lack of proprioception, which is joint balance. So a couple of really interesting things we are learning about the science of ACL injury, that this tends, or we think this process is starting before you get injured. So what they found is that injured versus non-injured or healthy controls, that in all their joints, they have less joint sense. So what I want you to do, everyone close your eyes. You're gonna make a thumbs up. Okay, you're gonna bring your thumb pointing down, thumb pointing up, thumb pointing down, thumb pointing up, and now I just want you to go at any rate you would like. Up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Everyone go and stop. Don't open your eyes. Do you know where your thumb is in space? Okay, you all have proprioception. Amazing. Open your eyes. Okay, now what we have found, obviously you're gonna know where your thumb is, right? These are like micro movements that are unconscious to you. So our body's natural nervous system is always monitoring, always assessing where we are in space. People that get ACL injuries, we see this before their injury occurs. So if we can identify some people that have that issue, maybe we can save them from having an injury. Now, the other piece of this, which kind of goes with joint sense, is motor control. Now, motor control is how well you're able to control your body as you're moving. So part of that has to do with how well the brain is working, how well it's communicating with your body, and part of that has to do with the ACL itself. So your ACL is a sensory structure. It is not just a ligament. It is constantly sending information to your brain about where your knee is in space. So what we have found is that people that have ACL tears, if you look at images of the brain, that even before their tear occurs, there's some changes in the way that sensory information is being processed. I would speculate that has to do with kind of the neurological fatigue, stress of life, how many games did you play this week type of thing. But that's speculation, so. Okay, the other big thing, yes?
Just a question on the muscle section.
Hit me.
For the ACL, is there typically a region, is that typically associated with a specific muscle around the knee, like the quad and the hamstring, in regards to
So what's interesting is, yes, at the knee, because now we don't have the ACL there to send messages about where the knee is in space. You can observe this on both sides, though. So is it chicken or the egg? We don't know. Is it happening before the injury? Is it happening after? It's kind of unclear, but it is both legs, pre-injury. Does that answer your question? Enough meat on the bone? We feel, okay, cool. All right, big modifiable thing that, 90% of female athletes don't get is like formal strength and conditioning, right? So like when we look at the boys, there's a very high likelihood if they're wrestling, if they're playing football, they're gonna start some form of weight training, some form of strengthening as young as like middle school. And that doesn't happen a lot for female athletes, despite like the pile of evidence this high that that's really important. So not having adequate strength in your body means that we don't, even if you have the proprioception, even if you have the motor control, if you're not strong enough to use it, then that's a problem. So I'll get into the statistics a little bit, but any bit of strength training is going to reduce your risk of having an ACL injury, like, period. And that doesn't necessarily have to be weights, but eventually it should be weights once we get you going. So anyone, ladies in here, have you ever had like a formal strength and conditioning experience? Okay, good. Not a great sample size here. Okay, the other thing is cumulative fatigue. So kind of what I touched on before, right? If you are super stressed, if you're not sleeping enough, if you're not getting enough recovery between workouts, enough recovery between all your different sports. Because think of this, like if you're playing a travel team, if you're playing your school team, maybe you have a little something on the side. You know, those events are meant to be structured with rest in between. And a lot of people aren't getting that. So that is one thing that we can definitely at least be looking at to see, okay, am I really tired? Do I need a rest day? Do I need to take a break? That's something that's totally controllable, that it's just worth mentioning. Okay. Now, as far as the full picture, we don't have the full picture just yet, right? We don't really know exactly why ACL tears occur, besides all of those things we just talked about lining up in a row at the same time. Hopefully one day we have that missing puzzle piece, but my goal today is to give you a deeper understanding of the puzzle pieces we do have an answer to, know how to identify them, and see what we can do about them. Okay, so maybe we can identify people at risk. So there's no one screen that's gonna give you ACL risk vision and say, okay, you're definitely at risk. But there's some things we definitely know contribute to injury risk, kind of like we talked about before, like joint limitations, motor control, all those different buckets that contribute to ACL tears. So we're gonna go through a couple screens. We're gonna teach you guys what we're looking for in them. Now these screens are examples, right? It's not like these are the only screens you can use. There's a lot of ways to assess strength. There's a lot of ways to assess motor control. I just want you guys to understand what exactly we're looking at. So Vinny, you're being called up. Okay, so we're gonna do a single leg sit to stand test, which is like a single leg squat test.
22 of these I got?
22, or you may be at risk of ACL injury. Just do a couple. Just do a couple. Yep. So what we're looking for, you can slow it up. Whoa, chill out. What we're looking for is that he has control throughout the full range of motion. We're not seeing any major knee wibble wobble outside of, a little balance loss, and then he catches himself because we're all human. It's okay. So what the research has actually validated is that if someone is unable to do 22 of these, when they looked at athletes across the season, they have a higher risk of injury. And when they look at people that have had an ACL injury, they have a less likelihood of making it back to their pre-injury performance 2 years later. So obviously you could just practice this and get better at it. But it's just one example of how we can look at gross lower extremity strength. Does everyone feel solid on that? Does anyone want to see if he could do 22 or?
I don't see that.
So that would be an example of a little bit of poor motor control. You don't have to do 22 if you don't want to. Look, he's sweating already. Okay, any questions about that? And that's going to be looking at the buckets of strength, the buckets of motor control, and the buckets of joint sets. Okay. Another thing we want to look at is landing mechanics. So I'm a big believer that, we don't have to demonize certain motions, but there are movements that are patterns, right? And we know the knee falling in is a pattern that we want to avoid. And just isn't a way to move athletically, right? That's not your peak performance landing like this. So Vinny is going to show us a depth drop jump. Yeah, we could do single leg. So this is one of the screens that we can use to assess landing mechanics, which is obviously we want to land with good landing mechanics. If you're a lacrosse player going up for the draw, obviously you're not stepping down from a box, but you might be doing something like this and then pivoting to go bring the ball down the field. So assessments like this can give us an idea of how someone is going to move in a game situation. Do you want to show double leg too? So something we're going to be looking for is that he's landing quietly, meaning he's flexing at the ankles, hips, knees, making sure he's not falling in with any like, whoa, that's a lot of valgus. A little bit here and there isn't going to kill you, but we want to make sure that you have the ability to not do that when we cue you. We also want to be looking at these screens without like cueing people if you guys are like giving this. So we just, because this is our like detective time. We don't want to tell them what we're looking for. We want to see what they got. That's good. You don't have to do that anymore. Show them a bad one. No. So that would tell us that maybe he has a little hip weakness. Maybe we got to, take a little bit of a deeper look at some of the other sport-specific things that he's going to be doing when he plays. What sport do you play, Vinny? Soccer? Not badminton? No. So this is a good way for us to just get a glimpse into what's going on. Now, here's the thing. You also want to be looking at some of this stuff when they're not paying attention, right? Because I could land perfectly like this if you tell me, if I know I'm being watched. So observing people on the field too is like another good a little tidbit to see what's actually going on. You have thought?
No, you're right. Because sometimes when we're all putting stuff up on Instagram, we'll have big time guys there, right? And you took stuff, and I go home and like I look at the video, and you'll see like even some of the guys who are really good, if they do a deck drop to a skater, like I'll put this video up and then you'll slow it down like an inch shot, and you'll look at it, you'll catch the focus, you'll catch something like that all the time when you're not really coaching them on it. Just give me
Exactly.
a movement right now, 100%.
Yeah.
And then we'll have another video.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So joint restrictions. There's you could have this in any joint, right? One that we know to be associated with increased risk of any lower limb injury and ACL injuries is a lack of ankle mobility. The reason why is when you're landing and cutting, well, one of the reasons why, when you're landing and cutting, you can't bring that knee over the toe. So this is a pretty, when you are running and cutting, and if you are doing so with like 30 degrees of knee flexion, that's going to be a riskier situation, or landing, right? If you're able to absorb your force with your knee, it means your knee is strong, but if your knee is strong and you can't get your knee over your toe because your ankle is restricting you, that's a risk factor. So what we want to see is that essentially his knee can come over his toe. Beautiful, stunning, amazing. Now, one way I like to do this outside of the clinic or even in the clinic is do you want to do the closed chain one? This guy? It's okay. Okay, so this is one that we snagged from the SFMA. So when he bends his back leg, what we're looking for is that his knee comes to the bisection, which is just like the middle. Can you girls see? Come a little closer. You're like sitting in the back. There's like 7 of us. Get up here. So what we're looking for, if I drew a line straight down, is that he's crossing the middle of his ankle bone. So you guys feel your ankle bone if you're unfamiliar. Yeah, you're barely making it. Barely making it. Now, if he can't get there, then that shows that he probably doesn't have enough closed chain dorsiflexion, which is something you need to be athletic, essentially. So that's one way we can screen it. You can measure, you could take out the goniometer, but this is like my favorite way because it's easy peasy and we know how much motion he has. On the other end, yeah, you got to get it even. So we're looking ankle bone. If you draw a line in the middle, that his knee can get there. Maybe hold on, I'll throw a plumb line up for you. Okay, so just so you could visualize. Oh no, it's not looking good. All right, Vinny has homework. Any questions on that?
We're working on it. We're working on it.
It was good. Okay.
Let's run it on you. Come on, don't be embarrassed. Come on, let's just do.
Let's see. Come on. Here. Keep your hand on this. Okay. So you're gonna go heel to toe, and then use the first. I know you're tall. I'm short, so you're gonna bend both knees. Oh, brother. Okay. So the goal is that your heel doesn't lift up. You're cheating a little bit, but I like the competitiveness there. Okay, so I'm going to actually ask you to switch feet just so they can see. Nope, stay that way. Yeah. Oh, this foot is a little better. Okay, so we have, this is the middle, just visualizing it. So I think you pretty much make it there on this side. Looks like we got to stretch that left calf a little bit. That's a little tight. Oh. Thank you. Round of applause for a lovely volunteer. Okay. Now this is the one that's less exciting. It's exciting to do screens, exciting to do strength tests, but we gotta be also looking at that cumulative fatigue bucket, right? So we wanna be talking to our athletes, right? Like if you guys didn't sleep 7 hours, how many nights do you sleep 7 hours a night? Being real.
Like 0?
Like 0? How much do you sleep?
What?
How much do you sleep?
I sleep around 7, like 6.5.
Okay, I'm gonna allow it. As long as you feel well rested, right? Are they eating enough? Are they getting enough protein? I'm a big, we need to be eating enough person. If you're not fueling properly, that can lead to your body needing to rest more, right? So just getting enough calories. Any stress, work, friends, are you in a fight? You know, those things are going to play a factor. When was your last break from competitive play? And how sore are you? Do we need rest days or just lower the intensity of this workout? So like on days that you have your sleep bucket full, you got your 6.5 hours, you ate enough, you got no stress, things are going to come a little bit easier on the field, come easier in practice. And the point isn't that if you slept 6.2 hours and not 7, that you don't play, but we're looking at all the different buckets and saying, when I'm really stressed, when I'm not sleeping enough, when I'm not getting enough good food, maybe that's a time I need to look inward and see, like, do I just ease up on my intensity a little bit? Is this the day I go hard as humanly possible? The answer, hopefully, is no. Just something to look at. Now, what can we do about it? A lot. So, an increase volume per week of 10% strength training decreases your risk of ACL injury by 4%. At some point, there's a diminishing return, so it doesn't mean start increasing your training volume by 80% and you'll be really bulletproof from ACL injury. That's not really practical either, because then you're just going to fall into the I'm tired and sore bucket. But we want to be understanding that the role of strength in this is massive, and it is so easy to change, right? It just means getting to the gym 2 times a week, learning some foundational strength movements, and that can be really protective. So I think always thought that statistic was like, whoa, yes.
So just the last piece is, so 10 increasing 10% lift volume per week. Is that is a 4% decrease also per week?
So this study is looking at the effects of people that participated in like a full, what we call like a mesocycle, right? So maybe they did, I can't remember the exact weeks. I could get it for you, but I think it was, they looked at like 3 months. So like obviously to have the physiological changes we're looking for, you have to do it more than one time or 1 week. This has to be like over 3 months or so. So that's a really good clarifying question, honestly. So like this, everything we're about to talk about too, the actionable steps, like you need to be consistent and it needs to be done for at least 3 months to really start to see these benefits. Great question. Any other questions? It looks, you want to raise your hand or just flexing? Okay. Okay. So there is a lot of evidence that ACL warm-ups are effective. One in particular is probably the most researched. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the best, but it is the most researched. So the FIFA 11 Plus was put out, it was like 2007. This is old news. But when performed for at least 3 months, we saw a big decrease in female athletes' risk of ACL injury. Now, part of the reason why is because they were doing it at least 3 times a week. I think one of the studies was 2 times a week, but like before you practice, and that helps address those neurological components because it gives you reps to practice. So it helps your body and your nervous system learn how it should be moving. Now, these statistics, that's like pretty powerful, right? And the reality is that just doing this alone, I can't say is going to like completely reduce your risk of injuries. But when they looked at these samples, right, these groups of soccer athletes, it did. So what that says to me is that we should absolutely be implementing this stuff, at least the principles of it, getting people strength training. I can't give you an exact number at how much, it decreases your risk of injury, but it would make me feel a lot better and sleep more soundly at night if this stuff was considered. So what we're going to do now is we're going to learn phase 1 of the FIFA 11. We're all going to get up and have some fun. And then I think that's it pretty much. Okay, so let's go. All right, so anyone that wants to participate is welcome to. No pressure.